afternoon, everyone. It's 6 p.m. in Lagos, Nigeria, 1 p.m. Eastern Time in the US. Thanks for joining us at Data Science Nigeria Masterclass that is aimed at supporting academic and scientific research with special interest in PhD and MSc students. It's a great afternoon, and we're looking forward to a great learning experience that will take us through 2 great days of learning. We're going to start today, and of course, we're going to continue tomorrow. So I'm very excited. I want to believe you're excited as I am. So I want to welcome you especially. I can see about 106 participants who are already in the room. Just quick protocol as we go through this session today. Number one, if you have questions, you can drop it in question and answer, and just drop it there, and then we will pick the question and pass them over to our speaker. Secondly, if there is a need for anyone to be allowed to speak based on the question, you can raise your hand, and then we can chat with you to know what it is, and then we can take it from there. I'm excited. We have about 119 people already who have joined the club. 121 is increasing so speedily. So I want to welcome you. So before we go straight into the class, I'll just quickly do some quick housekeeping and introduction. So in terms of Twitter, this is the handle of our speaker, so that if there are big words or some amazing statement that you want to share with the world from her, please tweet and tag her, and also tag Data Science Nigeria. Please note this. So you might just a quick run through who we are, Data Science Nigeria. You may know about us, but it's important to underscore who we are, our vision, and what is driving what we do. We have a vision to raise 1 million AI talent in 10 years. And this is across all spectrum, both from academic perspective, industry, applications, AI for social good, and all that. And this is based on our understanding of what we call AI plus genotype. And I'm sure you're all familiar with A plus, B plus. We believe there's a new genotype called AI plus. And what makes them special is that they are universal donors of AI knowledge, and they're also universal recipients of AI knowledge. And that's the spirit that is driving Data Science Nigeria, that indeed there's spark of brilliance everywhere. Opportunity is not universal, but spark of brilliance is everywhere. So if we create a platform that is inclusive, that is disruptive, we can reach out to as many people as possible everywhere, such that everyone can learn and understand AI and apply it to their various domains of existence. And of course, this can happen every day. Okay? And that will explain our growth in the last 3 years, where we have evolved to the point of being the #1, winning the #1 AI award in Africa, Matai Impact Award at Deep Learning in Durban last year. And this is based on the fact that we have taught hundreds of thousands via online, offline, face-to-face content development. And we have practical proof of deploying these students into great jobs in Nigeria and even outside Nigeria. We have a lot of MSc and PhD students who have gone through our program, who have secured great research scholarships, and those who have secured placement in telco, in banks, and in various industries. Of course, we are humbled to say we run the largest free AI learning platform in Nigeria, which we have classified under 30 unique platforms. And those platforms covers all segments from beginners to kids and teenagers to intermediate, experts, university students, professionals. And these are done via face-to-face, online, offline, and hands-on. These are pictures of some of our community engagement across the country. That's the bandwidth of our expression. And of course, we have learning community on campus, where we support learning as in a structured and organized way. We are now on 17 campuses. We call it Data Science Nigeria AI Plus Clubs. So if you're a student and you're not aware of our club, this is an opportunity to check our website and join. But beyond the campuses, we also exist in cities. We call that AI Plus Cities. So we are in 23 cities in Nigeria. And what they do, they meet, they learn, they share best practices together. Of course, we have a hub in Yaba where we run AI every day. We teach young people. We bring experts all over the world to teach. And of course, we move around the country, like I said. And of course, we have a book that is aimed to support our vision to democratize AI and disrupt early education by exposing young people to AI education much earlier in their, life. And of course, the book has secured a lot of global endorsement and is available for sale for anyone globally, from Amazon, paperback, Kindle, to Apple, to Google Play, and of course, those that want to make bulk order. And our unique approach is that those who may not be able to afford the book, so we're training the teachers, and we're giving them copies of the book free of charge so that the knowledge can cascade down even to public educational system. And then we have some of our members in Niger and Kano State who are also taking the learning of the school to public primary schools and public secondary schools, which reinforces our philosophy that everyone deserves the basic knowledge of AI at very early stage, whether in public or private school. These are our AI boot camp in Lagos, our summer school for kids. So having said that, so before we go to class, just to let you know that Data Science Nigeria is running classes almost every day throughout this period. So next week we have some classes. Our AI Plus campus in the University of Lagos is currently running 2 weeks class of getting started with machine learning. It started on Monday 18th, and it will continue Saturday 30th. So for anyone that wants to get the full grasp of the foundational knowledge, this is a class to join. And then next week again, Friday, we're going to be hosting Dr. Stephen Odaibo. I will be introducing Deep Learning 101 for students and professional demystified. So you may want to register so that you can get a link to attend this class. And then next week, Thursday, we're going to be having our ladies. Ladies is a female community created by Data Science Nigeria to support inclusion and encourage young ladies, both professional and students, who like AI, to have a community of mentoring, of networking, of best practice sharing to support their growth. And that's why we have called it Ladies Like AI by Data Science Nigeria. So next week, Thursday, 28th of May, we're going to be running a special meetup online, which is building a career in AI and data science. And these fantastic ladies will be sharing sharing their experiences, how they grew their expertise. These are experienced people in different industries, telecoms, banking, consulting, with solid industry and academic experience. And for this, we are providing data grant for 50 qualified attendees. Of course, those 50 must be female because we want to encourage their community. So please check this out and try to be part of this event. Of course, our AI hub in Yaba is closed because you all know what is happening globally, but we remain very available. So you can reach us for anything via any of this number. For our data crowd, which is our application that we use to engage the community in data collection, the number is there. We offer consulting services, so we support companies to solve their business problems. So these are the numbers to call. We also run paid training, which allows us to be sustainable and allow us to fund a lot of other things that we do. We offer recruitment as a service where we help companies to recruit data scientists. We also do business. Our research team are available on the phone. If you have any problem with your AI Plus membership, that's the number to call. And if you want to buy the AI book, that's the number to call. So please, we are available on the phone anytime. And you can download our annual report to see what we do. So welcome to the class today. It's a great day. We are all excited. We are all here to learn. It's a masterclass, hands-on, intense immersion into how to become a world-class research writer. And it's a pleasure for us to welcome someone who is genuinely passionate about building capacity, someone who is genuinely passionate about giving back, someone who has spent a lot of our time investing in developing talent in Africa. And you can see some of the proofs. That was her in Sierra Leone, sometimes in September 2019, where she facilitated a writing workshop. Same again, she was at New Lips, Black in AI conference in Canada 2019, where she was a keynote speaker. That's giving you the bandwidth of the person that will be speaking to us today. In February, she was in Tanzania, where she was supporting, she did the same thing, face-to-face, to help young academic researchers to fine-tune their writing skill. Of course, she was at our AI bootcamp in Lagos in November last year, where she facilitated classes in research writing, particularly in the use of health data research using social media. I'm sure a lot of people who are in the class will remember our class. So meet our speaker, Dr. Elaine Nsoesie, PhD. She's an assistant professor at Boston University of Public Health, based in Massachusetts in United States of America. She's the founder of HT of Right. So I think it should be provided right. I'm sure she will tell us how best to pronounce it, which helps researchers to write great papers. She has PhD in computational epidemiology from Virginia Tech. I'm sure many of you will know Virginia Tech as one of the top 10 technology schools in the world. She's an expert in the application of novel data and methods to solve global health problems. Her research interest is largely in the area of statistical and computational approaches for public health surveillance, modeling of infectious diseases, and understanding of disease spread and public health practice. It's a great pleasure to welcome today our guest speaker, Dr. Elaine Nsoesie. So Elaine, you are welcome. So you have the floor.
Hi, Dr. Elaine. You might need to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, so you might need to start from the beginning because we didn't pick the initial session.
All right, so I have a headphone on and that's making problems. Let me go back to the beginning. All right, great. So restarting. So the session for today and tomorrow is going to be about how to write and publish a scientific paper. For today, we'll focus on laying the groundwork. So we'll talk about things like sentences and paragraphs and how to write paragraphs well. And then tomorrow, we'll go into how do we construct paragraphs for your introduction and your methods, and what are the other things that you should be thinking about when you're writing the different sections of a paper. So here are some contact details. You can check out our website. It's called Rethe. So Rethe means right in my mother's dialect. And you can check out what we have on the website, what kinds of services we offer, but I'm also going to mention them as well. If you have questions or if you have an article that you want us to help you with, you can send us an email to rethe.org@gmail.com. And as Bayo mentioned, I'm also on Twitter, and I'm planning to have a few more sessions this summer, so I'm going to be tweeting about that. So Red There was founded specifically with the idea to fill in a need which I identified in most African communities, the fact that there's not a lot of representation in the scientific community from Africans. So we want to make sure that Africans have the tools that they need to write good papers and publish in journals or conferences or other avenues of interest to people. So we provide the tools and resources that you need. And we do this through several different ways. This includes workshops. So last year we had several workshops and I think we had 3 different workshops or 4. And we do these workshops on campuses. We would be having one right now in Nigeria, but because of coronavirus, we're doing this online. And the workshops are focused on teaching people how to get published. So you learn skills and strategies that will help you write and publish in scientific journals. But then we also talk about how do you write for the public. So if you've done research, but you want to communicate your research to an audience that's beyond the academia. Maybe you want to write for a scientific magazine. How do you do that? How can you communicate your findings to that audience? We have a blog as well, and I would definitely encourage you to check this out. And you can also sign up to receive updates from our blog. Here are some articles that we've written. So how to avoid plagiarism, which is a very important topic to think about. How do you write your introduction? And some articles that you should check out on scientific writing. So we try to update the blog at least once a month. This didn't happen in April because of coronavirus, but we're hoping to get back to that. We also have a mentoring program. We ran the first one. The first one just ended in April. It was an 8 weeks program. We had one-on-one mentoring. So people who applied would be matched to a mentor whose field is close to theirs. And then the mentor will help them in writing their papers. So they can get one-on-one feedback on their manuscripts. And they can help them write in different sections of their manuscripts during the 8-week section. We also had group mentoring sessions as well for people that could not be matched to one-on-one mentors. And they're similar to what we're doing right now, having the session online. So people will come in every Saturday and we'll talk about how to write different sections of a manuscript. And they also were able to receive feedback on your manuscript. So they sent in their manuscripts, so people who were interested in doing that, and then got feedback for what they've written so far and how to write the next sections for their manuscripts. So here are the things that we're going to cover. We're going to talk about writing in general. We're going to talk about scientific writing specifically. We are going to have discussions of sample papers, probably not in the specific order, but it will be incorporated into the different sections. We'll talk about writing the introduction or the background of a paper. We'll talk about how to write your methods and your material sections, your results and discussions. And these are just to give you an idea of the kinds of things you should be thinking about when you're writing the sections, while acknowledging that this would differ for different fields. So whatever your field is, you want to pay attention to how people structure papers in that field and what kind of language people use, because the language can be different, significantly different from one field to another. So why is it important for us to write well? A lot of you are probably here because you're interested in academic writing. So you want to write either your thesis, or you want to write for a conference, or you want to get a paper published in a journal. But writing well will help you to follow your career. So if you can just learn how to construct sentences better, how to put together your information in a way that is easy for people to understand, then that will help you communicate with people, not just in your field, but people in other fields as well. So everyone is capable of becoming an excellent writer. It does require time and it does require effort. So one of the things to think about when you think about writing is reading. You cannot become a good writer if you're not reading. So some of the things I always ask people are, how many books have you read this year? How many research papers have you read this year? Because when you read in your field, when you read papers, often you see how other people write, you see how people organize your thoughts, and then you can learn the language of that field. You can learn how, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what are ways in which you can write so that people can understand what you're talking about. So it's important for you to read extensively within your field. You can also read in other fields as well. I do that. There's so many ways that you can learn how to write from just reading how other people write. And it can just gives you a strong background on how to organize thoughts, how to construct sentences, and how to put things in a way that is easy for people to understand. So write regularly. Don't wait until your project is complete to write. You want to write while you're working on your research because the ideas are still fresh in your head. So if you've just done an analysis, sit down and write about the analysis. It also helps you think through a problem. So you might get stuck, but then when you start writing about what you're working on, that can help you get unstuck. So you might identify problems just by writing about what you've done so far. Always aim to improve your writing. So there's never a point where you think that you've become so perfect that there's nothing more to learn. You can always improve your writing by learning from other people or reading books on writing or essays on writing. Use spelling and grammar checks. This is something that I think people need to always remember, especially if you're writing in Word. It's available, just use it and see how that can improve the errors that you might have made in your writing. Another thing to think about is that you should write with other people. Writing shouldn't be something that you do by yourself. Try to find peers in your field or mentors in your field who can help you write well. So there should be people that are also interested in writing. You can exchange ideas, you can read each other's work and give feedback. You can have them read your writing out loud and see if they get stuck while reading your writing. That always will show you that there's something that doesn't flow in your writing. So get feedback. You can also get feedback from us, from Rethe. Submit your papers to us. If you've written something and you want feedback, you can send it in and also mention what kind of feedback you're looking for, and we will do our best to provide feedback on your manuscript. So let's move on to scientific writing. There are different types of scientific writing, and the purpose is always to communicate ideas or findings to others. This could be your notebook, it could be a class paper, it could be a class project, but it could also be an academic journal article, which is what we will focus on during the sessions. Here are typical elements of a scientific paper: title, your author list, author addresses, abstract, introduction, materials, methods. All of these components are important. So don't think that there's any component that is not important, because things, for example, an illustration could be what makes or breaks your paper. So if you can design or make images that are very striking or communicate information very well, that can make for a very good paper. But you also want to think about the rest of the paper as well. So how do you write your introduction? How do you write your methods? What actually goes into tables, and what does not go into a table? These are all information that you should be thinking about as you work on your paper and as you structure your paper. Other things to think about are also selecting a journal. So how do you go about selecting a journal? There are some platforms that would ask you to enter your abstract, and then they would say these are possible journals that you can submit to. You can also look at how other people in your field publish. So what journals have they published in, and can you submit to those journals? You always want to look at the journal requirements. So what is the scope of the journal? And what do they expect you to present when you write a paper? What does the submission process look like? Do they have a platform that you can submit through? Do they expect you to send an email instead? Don't send an email when you should be submitting through a platform. So always look at these requirements. And the review process differs for different journals. Some might take a few months, some might take a few years. So you should also look at that information as well to make sure that you're aware of how long it might take for your paper to be reviewed before getting published. Some of you also might be thinking about conferences. So the review time for conferences is more shorter because conferences have to happen, but you still have to look at the journal requirements for, not the journal requirements, the requirements for the conference. So what is the conference expecting you to put in the paper? Because if you write a paper that is longer than the length that the conference has set in place, then the paper will be rejected. So look at all of those factors, think about all of those things. Don't waste your time writing a paper that will be rejected because you do not follow the requirements. So good writing is clear, which means that it focuses on providing details that are important. So you don't need to write about things that you don't think are important in your paper. So when you've done your analysis, you've done your study, you probably have a lot of different things that you've done, a lot of different information that you've generated. You need to think about what part of that is important. What part of these do I need people to know? And that's what you should be including in your paper. Good scientific writing is also simple. And this means that it uses very direct language. And this is very important when you're writing for an audience that is broader than your field. So if you're submitting to a journal or to a conference where everyone does not understand the particular details of your field, then you want to think about using fewer technical and jargon terms. You want to use language that is easy for people to understand, or if you have to use a technical term, make sure that you define that term so that someone who is not in your field can understand that. Good writing also is impartial in that it avoids making assumptions. So when you write, don't write things like everyone knows, or don't write things like the medium, this, let's say you have several data points and say this data point is is a medium of, or is the max, or falls within a particular range, unless if you can specifically show that it does. Don't make unproven statements like it can never be proved that. Present your information that you've collected and make sure that you support your conclusions with evidence. So I like numbers. So if someone is going to give me write some conclusion or summary of something, I want to see the numbers that back that up. So if you have numbers in your analysis, include those in the paper when you make statements. Good scientific writing is also structured logically. So your ideas and thoughts are expressed in a logical manner. So if someone is reading your paper, they should be able to follow. They should be able to think, okay, this happened and then that happened. And this is very important when you think about things like the methods, because you want people to be able to reproduce your methods. Your research is not just for you to do and then just write about it. Other people should be able to reproduce what you've done. So you should present it in a way that someone else can reproduce what you've done. Good writing is also accurate. So this is similar to what I've already mentioned. So you want to avoid things like almost, approximate, just give the exact value. So if you have an exact value, you have a number for something, give the number. It's also objective. So your statements or ideas are supported by evidence that demonstrates that the conclusions that you're drawing can be backed up, whether it's by what you've generated or what other people have generated. You should be able to support whatever conclusions you're drawing. All right, so we're going to have a discussion and exercise session. And this is a grammar review. This should be very easy, but I think it's very important for us to review that before we go into the next section. So what is a noun? I need people to give me examples of nouns and use the nouns in sentences. And you can use the chat window for that. Great, great. Those are all really good examples. All right, it looks like we all know what a noun is. So what is a pronoun? So let's do the same as we've done for a noun, and now give 2 examples of pronouns and then make sentences. Great, this is going very well. I think some people are answering both questions right now, that's wonderful. Just keep going. And then the last one that we want to review, make sure that people know what this is a verb. So I want you to give me 2 examples of verbs and use the verbs in sentences. Great, this is wonderful. Having so many people is exciting, but it's also very new because usually in the workshops we have 30 people or less. So this is a new experience for me. So thank you guys for all the examples. We're gonna move on now to talking about sentences. So our goal when we write papers is to basically put together sentences that make sense. And a sentence expresses a complete thought and contains both a subject and a predicate. So you guys all know, and you've all given me very good examples of sentences, but a lot of the papers that I review usually have fragments. So these are sentences, or they're not sentences, they're basically incomplete sentences. So an example would be the first one that I have here, so mandazi all over the table. So that fragment lacks a verb. So when you add a verb to that, you have that mandazi flew all over the table, or mandazi fell all over the table. Another example is a run-on sentence. This is something that I also see quite often. So in this case, we have, I thought the ride would never end, my eyes were crossed and my fingers were numb. So there's no punctuation, at least the punctuations are not in the right places. And one way we can make this sentence correct is to break it into 2. So we can say, I thought the ride would never end, full stop. My eyes were crossed and my fingers were numb. So sometimes fragments can be used to create a dramatic effect, but usually not in scientific writing. So maybe if you're writing an essay for a scientific magazine, or well, not in scientific writing as not in journal or conference papers, but if you're writing an essay for a magazine, for example, you could use fragments to emphasize specific points or to create a dramatic effect, especially at the opening of your writing, of your essay. So some things to consider when you're writing sentences are where to put each of the building blocks. Is it correct to have a comma after the cross? Yes, you can have a comma after the cross. So there's something called the Oxford comma that you can look up. It just depends on where you're writing and who's reading the writing. You can have it in there or you can remove it. Think about where to put each of the building block in your sentence. So these are things like words, clauses, phrases. So you shouldn't just write a sentence the first time and just leave it there. You should always come back and ask yourself, does that sentence communicate what I'm trying to communicate? And then does it connect to the other sentences? If you're, you've written a paragraph, does it connect to all the other sentences in the paragraph? You also want to focus on the action. Some people tend to put the action in the sentence at the end of the sentence. That makes the sentence boring. So you want to put your action towards the front of the sentence. So what is the main point in the sentence? That should be closer to the front of your sentence. Another thing to think about is the sentence length. Cut out unnecessary words. So when I write, the first time I write, I just put everything down. And then I go back and I start rewriting everything that I've written. And usually in the process of editing, I cut out words, I cut out sentences, I cut out phrases that are not needed, because sometimes you've already expressed an idea and then you repeat it again in another sentence. And so you can delete the second sentence, or you can keep whichever one of the two sentences expresses the idea better. Use sentence length that allows you to communicate clearly, but also think about shorter sentences, because if your sentences are too long, it's hard for people to understand what you're trying to say. So if your sentence starts hitting 20 to 25 words, that's too much. Think about how to break it up into smaller and shorter sentences. So here are just a few examples. So the first sentence says, at the present time, we are conducting new experiments. You can rewrite this to just say, currently, we are conducting new experiments. Or you can even get rid of currently and just say, we are conducting new experiments. All those three sentences give you exactly the same meaning, but you can make it shorter. So we are conducting new experiments, or currently we are conducting new experiments. It's the same thing. Another example is existing research suggests A is better than B. You could just say research suggests A is better than B. So simple sentences follow 5 basic patterns. This is just for you to, this is not for you to memorize. It's just for you to have it at the back of your mind as we talk about sentences and paragraphs and then complete papers. So an example would be, you have a subject and a verb. So in this case, we have Okanye winked. In the second case, we have a subject, a verb, and a direct object. So Sarah is the subject, grinds is the verb, her teeth is the direct object. And number 3, we have a subject, a verb, indirect object, and then direct object. So Elaine offered her dog a bone. So this is why we're reviewing verbs and nouns, so that you can remember the grammatical, excuse me. So you can have a review of grammar as we talk about this. Number 4, the workshop named Busola the class president. So you have the subject plus the verb, you have a direct object, and then you have Busola, and then you have the object complement. And then number 5 is, you have Helen is a math whiz. You have the subject plus the linking verb plus the predicate noun. In the other example, we have an adjective instead. So these are just things to keep in the back of your mind. So we're going to do another exercise. For this exercise, I just want the first 5 people we can submit. So let's write about a tornado that struck a small town without warning. So combine the sentences into 2 or 3 sentences at most. So submit your responses in the chat, please. Also, you have to use all the sentences, don't drop any. So you want to communicate all the ideas that are represented in the sentences, but you want to put it now in 2 or 3 sentences at most. You can add new phrases, you can add transition phrases, you can use adjectives. I really like all the examples that people are presenting. They're very different. There was a tornado that struck a small town. It caused a great deal of damage, a number of serious injuries, and several deaths. A tornado occurred in a small town without warning, causing serious damages, many injuries, and several deaths. No warning, it caused a great deal of damage. It also caused a number of serious injuries and several deaths. So there are several different ways that you can combine sentences. Here are 3 examples that I present. The first is using a series. So the tornado, a lot of people have already done this. The tornado struck the small town without warning, causing extensive damage, numerous injuries, and several deaths. The second case, we use a semicolon, and we say the tornado struck the town without warning, semicolon. Therefore, it caused extensive damage, numerous injuries, and several deaths. In the third case, we use a relative pronoun. So we say the tornado, which was completely unexpected, swept through the small town, causing extensive damage, numerous injuries, and several deaths. So these are all different ways that you can combine sentences, and several people have presented several really good examples. So whenever you could write a paper the first time and have several different sentences by themselves, but then you can also think about how to combine those sentences so that it's more cohesive and it presents, it makes for a stronger sentence. Here's another example. You can use some of the ideas that I just gave you. Let's try to combine these 3 sentences into 1 or 2 sentences. All right, we moved on from the tornado. Let's have examples for what we currently have on the screen. Any examples combining the current sentences? We compare expectations with experimental results and identified any terminal identifier in base composition, which are the nearest neighbors of those specifically recognized by the enzymes. We compare expectations with experimental results, identify any terminal identifier in base composition to stem the nearest neighbors of those specifically recognized by the enzymes. Okay. Compare our expectations with experimental results, find terminal identifier in base Which are the nearest name of those? This is getting too fast. I can't read some of this. Experimental results, see a difference in the base composition. We compare excitations, experimental results, and define a terminal that define base composition, system that are the nearest neighbors. Okay, great. I mean, these are all good examples, and people are combining the sentences in interesting ways. I would prefer to have 2 sentences because I like shorter sentences, but some of you have created 1 sentence that works pretty well. Okay, so thank you guys for all the examples. Let's move on to the next one. So instead of combining sentences, we want to break sentences. So sometimes you have a sentence that is too long and you want to think of ways in which you could break it into multiple sentences so that it's easier to understand. So this is an example. So in this case, it says the speaker, though he paid $15,000 to attend the conference, probably felt that the egg on his face was not worth it, and he must still be wondering how a person once all-powerful could have been subjected to such ignominy. So if you break this up, so one place where this is easy to break up is where you have the and. So if you have a sentence that tends to have either too many ands or is combining 2 sections that are already pretty long with an and, you can break those sentences into 2 where you have the and. So if you break the sentence into 2, now we have a new sentence that basically gets rid of the and then now you have a new sentence that starts with he must still be wondering. So here is another exercise. And in this case, we have a sentence. It's not too long, but it does have quite a few ands in there. How can we break this sentence into 2 or more sentences? I think 2 sentences should be good. All right, we have one example. What is the second sentence?
That was almost successful.
Yep, that's a very good example.
Go to the company's clinic and do a medical checkup before they.
All right, we have another one. So what's the second sentence?
I didn't bother to go because already I knew the results.
None of them came visiting again. I just sent a message from Nina to greet us and the baby. Auntie Ebola, she supported me fully for the wedding. She even bought the wedding gown. But since she got to know what happened to us, she has refused to come or call me.
All right, here are my examples. So these are 2 ways in which you could break the sentences, or this sentence. So the first one says, the intruder entered through the window. I think I already saw someone put this up. He tiptoed down the hall and stood under the stairwell, waiting in the shadows. The second one breaks it after hall. So it says, intruder who had entered through the window tiptoed down the hall, full stop. He stood under the stairwell and waited in the shadows. So you can always add new words to sentences when you break them up or when you combine them to make sure that the sentence flows. So in this example, in the second case, I have added Wu had entered. Instead of just haven't entered, I'd added Wu had entered. So there's so many different ways in which you can make the sentences work better for you. Another thing to think about when you write sentences is to make phrases parallel. So this is a very simple example, and I see this all the time as well. Aids and Lagos talk about running the country and the manipulation of constituents. You can make that sentence so much better by just changing manipulation to manipulating. So now you have running in the first part of the sentence, matching manipulating in the second part of the sentence. So it's very simple, but it's something that you should always think about. So when you're writing a sentence, make sure that your phrases are parallel to each other. Like, it's not the end of the world if it isn't, but it just reads better when it is. Here's another exercise. I would like you to simplify this worded sentence. And you don't have to use the words in this sentence. So if you read this sentence and you had to rewrite it in a way that is simple and straight to the point, using as few words as possible, how would you rewrite this sentence? Again, you don't have to use the words in this sentence. Like, if you just had to say this to someone, read what this person wrote. How can you say this in a way that is just straightforward and pretty easy? I really like that answer. That is so good. The study needs additional work. That is so good. Great, good answers. So my answer was basically very similar to the one submitted by Izad Zidia. Mine was the study needs more work. So you can take this very long sentence and just simplify it to 5 words, and you capture the same idea that the person is trying to express in the sentence. Another thing to think about, which I've mentioned before, is jargon. So jargon is basically language used in a particular field or profession or by a certain group of people. And it's usually technical and not very easy for other people who are not in that field to understand. So this is another example. This one is using jargon. I'm having conceptual difficulty with these employee mandates. So how would you rewrite this in a way that is simple and easy for someone to understand? The employee mandates are hard to understand, I would say. I find this mandate is difficult, yep. I have issues with these mandates. I like that. The only problem is issues is very broad. It's complicated. I like that word. So word choice is very important. So there's so many ways you can say complicated. You can use issues, you can use difficult, but it's important for you to think about which word works best. So who are you communicating to, and what impact will your word choice have on that communication? So let's spend the rest of the time talking about paragraphs. So we've talked a lot about sentences. And the reason why we write sentences is so that we can put the sentences into paragraphs, and then our paragraphs end up making sections of papers, and then those sections end up making complete papers. So parts of a paragraph, there's a topic sentence, there's the body of the paragraph, and then there's a closing. So your topic sentence is telling your readers what the paragraph is about. It doesn't always have to be the first sentence, but it has to work. So if you decide that is the second sentence, it should fit in the paragraph in a way that it stands out, in a way that people understand that this is the topic of the sentence. This is the focus of, the topic of the paragraph, or the focus of the paragraph. And then the body of the paragraph is where you place all the information that is supposed to help readers understand the topic of that paragraph. So there's no defined length or how many sentences you should have in your body of your paragraph. This depends on you and what you're writing about. So sometimes you want your paragraph to, so what I mean by it has to work, it means that people should understand it. If someone is reading a paragraph, they should understand this is the topic sentence. So in the body of the paragraph, you can put as much information as you want. And the goal is that the information should support the main topic. So you shouldn't start writing about one thing in a paragraph and then end up with something else. It should flow in a way that if someone is reading it, they understand this is what the paragraph is about. And then your closing comes after all the details have been included in the body of the paragraph. So your closing sentence can summarize a paragraph. You can remind readers of what the topic of the paragraph is. You can link your paragraph to the next one, and you can do all three. So here's an example where we connect sentences. So when you write a paragraph, you need to think about how every sentence in that paragraph connects to the previous sentence and to the next sentence. So is it building on the previous sentence, or is it completely unrelated to the previous sentence? And if it's unrelated to the previous sentence, why is it in the paragraph? You should find a way to explain or express why that sentence should be there. So in this example, it says, it is less than 50 years since we first talked in the United States of the two sectors of a modern society. So the public sector, which is the government, and the private sector, the business. In the past 20 years, the United States has begun to talk of a third subdivision, the nonprofit sector, those organizations that increasingly take care of the social challenges of a modern society. So when you read the sentences, what do you notice? There are actually only two sentences. What do you notice? So one thing you notice is that the sentences are connected to each other. Yeah, there are dashes in there. Yeah. There's a flow of thought. For someone else, it says it's confusing. Someone says there's no connection between them. It actually flows quite well. And if you look at the two sentences, something that stands out is the word sector. And sector is used to basically repeat the main idea of the sentences. So the first sentence talks about the sectors, but it repeats sector multiple times. And the second sentence also mentions the word sector. So when you're reading these two sentences, you immediately notice that there's that connection between the two sentences. You're both talking about sectors. And that's one way that you can use to link sentences. You can repeat phrases or you can repeat words. So if you write a sentence about one thing. So if this paragraph is longer, which it probably is, you would find additional sentences that build on the previous ideas and present an idea, a paragraph that is more cohesive than just looking at two sentences. So here's another example. This one is from a paper that we wrote a couple of years ago. And I've highlighted some of the things that you should focus on. I'm going to give you a minute to read. So some of the things that you should note is repetition of different phrases and different words. So the topic sentence here is that despite the associations that we've seen between obesity and the built environment, there are inconsistencies that exist. And so yeah, we talked about those associations, and then we also repeated in the last sentence in this paragraph. We mentioned inconsistencies a few times to connect sentences. We also mentioned measure and measurement and measuring. All of those are used to connect the ideas in the sentences and to build on the topic sentence. We also use furthermore. So these are transition words or transition phrases. Is something that you should also pay attention to. And you can use this to connect ideas, to connect sentences, to connect paragraphs. You can find this very useful when writing. Someone has issues with citations. I don't understand why they have issues with the citations. So the other example also is from another paper that we published this year. And this is also just to show you how we connected ideas and use the same phrases in different sentences. So in the first sentence, we talk about digital platforms. And then we mention digital platforms again in the second sentence, and in the third sentence, we do the same. And we also use the word or the phrase however to link the idea in the first sentence to that in the second sentence. So these repetitions are supposed to help you connect ideas to each other, help you build on an idea. So if you're working on a paragraph, you can repeat words, you can repeat phrases to build on a particular idea so that it flows through the paragraph. So when someone is reading this paragraph, they know we're talking about digital platforms because it keeps getting repeated throughout the paragraph. You can also use the same approach to connect paragraphs. So the paragraph that I just showed you, we talked about digital platforms and we used that several times. And then we end that paragraph by mentioning challenges associated with the use of digital platforms in sub-Saharan Africa. We can also connect that last sentence to the next paragraph by mentioning the word challenges. But another thing you should notice is that we're building on the previous idea. So we're saying these challenges exist, and then in the next paragraph, we're saying to address these challenges. So there should be always a connection between your paragraphs. They shouldn't stand by themselves. So if you write a paragraph and it ends in a particular way, how does your next paragraph build on that idea? How is it connected to that idea? So these are questions that you should always ask yourself when you're writing. So as I mentioned before, you want to use transition words and phrases to connect sentences and paragraphs. So these are things like however, also, in addition, furthermore, moreover, in contrast, when you're contrasting two things. So always think about how you can use phrases like that to connect two paragraphs when sometimes they might not seem very connected, but if one is presenting an idea and the other one is presenting an idea that is different from the first one, you can use things like in contrast to connect the two paragraphs. So that's a good question. So someone is asking whether the next paragraph must connect with the last sentence in the previous. Yes, it should connect in the sense that the ideas should flow. So it doesn't always mean that you have to have the same words. But if you're reading the paragraph, your next paragraph should be connected to the previous one. It could either be building an idea of the previous one, or maybe it's presenting a different idea, but you should show that it's presenting a different idea. So you could say things like, in contrast to what you've just previously discussed, here is something else that is different from that. Or in addition to what you've previously discussed. You can also use things like, I don't know if I have this, enumeration. So you can say, like sometimes I would say first, this happened, and then the next paragraph would say second, this happened. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that the last sentence connects to the previous one, but the next paragraph should connect to the previous paragraph. So some other things to think about when you write is your voice. Are you using an active voice or a passive voice? I tend to prefer active voice because I think it's more exciting than the passive voice, but some people tend to prefer passive voice. So here are just a few examples. So when you write in the active, you say things like the research officer designed the experiment. In the passive voice, you say the experiment was designed by the research officer. In the active voice, you would say, we agreed that the experiment should be blah, blah, blah. Well, in the passive voice, you say it was agreed that the experiment should be blah, blah, blah. One of the reasons why I don't like the passive voice, especially in scientific writing, is when you say things like it was agreed that the experiment should be, who agreed on it? So if I'm reading that article, I don't know who made that agreement. But when you say we agreed, then I know that it's you, or at least it's the authors that made that decision to do the experiment in that particular way. So these are all things that you should think about. You also want to think about personal versus impersonal. So personal things like also can be linked to active as passive as well. So like I or we believe, or saying things that basically you're claiming whatever you're doing. So some fields don't like this very much. They would rather use the impersonal approach. So you should also pay attention to what your field prefers or what your school prefers when you write about these different things. I usually use the personal myself, and that works pretty well for my field in public health. Most of the papers I publish are in public health journals, and that works pretty well. So when it comes to voices, I would be consistent throughout. Sometimes you write sentences and they all say we, and you don't need to say that for every single sentence. You can think about how to rewrite a sentence in a way that is easy, that you can make a few changes so that it's not consistently saying we at every point. Another thing to think about is tense. Do you want to present in the past tense or in the present tense? So this kind of math, this can also come into play when you think about different sections, which Good Luck was asking. So when you think about the methods versus the discussion, you can use different tenses for different sections. So when I write the methods, I always think about it as the past. So it's already past. So I tend to use past tense when I talk about the methods. In presenting the results, sometimes I will use past tense depending on the journal. Sometimes I use present tense because I think about the results as something that's happening right now. And so I will present it in the present tense. You can use both, and using both can bring clarity to your work. So always think about you can use both active and passive when you're writing about, when you're writing a paper. And this can matter, you can think about your different sections and how you want to use these different tenses. So if you're referring to a paper that has been published in the past, then you should use the past tense. If you're talking about findings in the present, then you should probably use the present tense. So you should think actively about all of these things. So we're almost done. We have a few minutes left. Arranging details in the paragraph. So scientific writing usually requires deductive reasoning. So this means that you organize information from the general to the specific. So it makes complex concepts easier to understand. So this is an example where from another paper, actually from one of the papers I just discussed. And we start from a general knowledge. So the global burden of disease study is looking at the whole world, and it talks about obesity in the whole world. And then we talk specifically about obesity in the US, and then we start talking about studies that have been done in regards to the US. So we start from the general, and then we come to the specific. You can also arrange details in the paragraph chronologically, and this is always useful when you're writing your methods. So in the methods, you go through a process, you do step 1, you do step 2, you do step 3, and so forth. So that's how you should also write your sections. So you should think about what is the first thing that I did, and write about that, and what is the second thing, and what is the third thing. So this is very important for people who want to reproduce your work, because they get to see what are the steps that you took to arrive at the results that you arrived at. You don't necessarily have to say first, second, third, but you just have to present it in a way that is chronological so that someone else can reproduce what has been done. So tomorrow, I'm gonna continue talking about some of the articles that I've mentioned in examples for how you think about your introductions and your methods and your results sections. So these are the articles. They're all free online. You can download them, you can read them. And I would suggest you take a look at them for tomorrow. References and contact details. So that's all for the session today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elaine, for such a great time. So if you have questions, please can you start dropping your question on the question area while Dr. Elaine start preparing answers to all the questions. But while we're doing that, we have some giveaway that we want to give. Dr. Elaine, we can stop sharing so that I can quickly project, okay? So we have some giveaway. I want to believe it's part of the engagement. So if you have questions, please drop your question in the question and answer box. So Dr. Elaine will be providing all the answers, and she's going to come back to answer all the questions in the next 5 minutes. So she's going to answer all the questions in 5 minutes because we are finishing by 7:30 Nigerian time. So we have some giveaways. So it's fastest fingers. And this is 2 gigabytes of free internet that you can use yourself or even give to somebody else. I'm sure you know our principle in data science Nigeria. We always want you to give to somebody else. So if you are ready, it's fastest fingers. You put the answers in the not in the question and answer area, in the chat room. Those who have questions should go to Q&A, write your question. Dr. Elaine is going to take all the questions and then come back with answers. For those who are ready to win 2 gigabytes of data, just go to the chat room and answer the question. So question number 1. Question number 1, you've got just 30 seconds. Lakon, please help me to check to know all the response that comes in on time.
Okay, responses are coming in already.
So that you just, so when it is closed, you just type closed, so that anything that comes after closed is not accepted.
30 seconds. Okay, so
closed.
Closed.
Okay, so the first 2 people to submit right, I've won for themselves 2 gigabytes of data that they can use or give to somebody else. So second question, list 3 ways to combine sentences. 3 ways to combine sentences. The first 2 right answers will win 2 gigabytes of data that they can use or share with someone else. Okay. So, Lakon, I think we can type that it's gone.
Yeah, gone.
Close, just type close. So everything after that is gone. So next question. It's about our speaker. We want you to also be familiar with our speaker. So if somebody's going to speak to you, we expect that you'll have gone to her LinkedIn page, read some of our papers, and try to check out. So this is the question. Do we have answers coming in?
Yeah, we have answers coming in. We are about to closed.
Okay, closed. We move on. So what's the answer to that? The answer is this. Do we have any correct answer?
Wow. It looks like we don't.
Okay, so let's move to the next question. What name do we call these words or phrases? Likewise, similarly, in the same vein, further, moreover, firstly, secondly, enumeration words. She explained this to us. What name do we call them? Okay. Do we say closed?
Yes, closed.
Okay, closed. Okay, yes. Transition words. Now, this is very easy. True or false? True or false? Dr. Elaine taught us about this. A paragraph consists of topic, sentence, the context, and the closing. True or false? The first two right answers we get for the
Right.
Okay. Close, okay? It's false. It's topic, sentence, the body, and the closing. So thanks so much, everyone. So we have just 10 minutes to go, and Dr. Elaine will be answering all the questions that have been typed out, and we round off for today. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Nigerian time. That is GMT +1. We look forward to seeing you for the extension of the class. Yes, give it. No, it's been a fantastic class. I'm sure you won't miss it. So Dr. Elaine, you have the floor to answer all the questions.
Yeah, I'm currently trying. So what is the proper way to reference an article? So there are several different ways you can reference an article. If you're writing for a specific conference or journal, they would usually tell you what reference style they like to use. So you should look into that as well. I tend to use Zotero to import references, and Zotero would have reference styles for different journals, and I just download those and I just use it. So I don't have to think about how to automate the process of creating references. I have seen and read a lot of research papers where I don't understand what numbering in superscript means after writing a phrase or keyword. That's usually the reference. So if you click on those, it will take you down to the list of references. Does it mean that chronological writing can be used only in methodology? It doesn't only have to be used in methodology. We've written viewpoint articles where we use chronological writing to present our ideas. So you don't only have to use it when you write the methods. You can use it in any way as long as the goal is to present your ideas in a way that is easy for people to understand. Is it best to use numbers or mention the name of the authors? Again, that depends on the journal. Different journals have different preferences. Different conferences have different preferences. So you should check that. What method can one employ in writing research proposals? This is a very general question, and I'm not sure how to answer it. So if you're writing a research proposal for your school, I would say first consult with your school to see what their requirements are, and also ask other people who've written research proposals before to see how they wrote theirs, so you can use that as an example to write yours. The slides will be provided. Can you get links to the papers posted? Yes. Should I just post that on the chat right now? Let's see. I'll just post that in the chat. So you can download those, they're free. Tomorrow's class, I think Bayu and others will take care of that. When writing literature review, is it proper to include the objective, the paper's contribution, advantage, and limitations of the paper? So it depends on the purpose of the literature review, but we'll talk a little bit about literature reviews tomorrow. And if the purpose is to see what has been done in the past, then yes, you should discuss what the objective of the paper is or was, and also the contribution of that paper. And you should also critique the paper if you have any suggestions on how the paper could have been improved. How do we get the recorded version of the seminar? I can't answer that. Transition word. How can one choose a topic to write on? I would say choose things that are of interest to you, and one way to come up with topics is to read what other people have done. Again, reading is always important. Read research that has been done in your field. Read especially the limitation sections or the future research sections. That would give you ideas of what to do. Again, back to references, I would always check whether it's the journal or is a conference, what their preference is for references. Someone is asking about putting off starting to write their thesis and they don't know where and how to start. Any suggestions? Start with a topic, an idea. So if you have an idea, go out and read what other people have written on that idea, and then that will help you develop your idea. How many years difference do we use when we reference? I'm not sure about that question. How best to write a commentary research? So a commentary research is usually if you have an idea that is new or is different from what other people are talking about. And so you would write your idea based on what has been done in the past and what you think is new that people should be doing. How do we use active words in the introduction of the article? Yes, you can use, or do we use active words in the introduction of the article? Yes, you can use active words in the introduction of the article. Here we have slides. Yep, I'm gonna let slides by and others to take care of that. Which sites do you use to see some publishing articles? I don't know what, I'm not sure exactly what that question is referring to. So if it's on where to find journals, I would say look in your field and see what other people have published in to see what journals you're publishing in. And a lot of journals now are offering discounts, especially open source journals for people from low and middle income countries. So never be afraid to ask for those discounts or waivers on fees. References on your research paper, yes, you can reference up to 10, 60 years ago. It always depends on your topic and how quickly the field is moving. Please suggest best practices for thinking of a PhD topic. Like, for example, how would we know if the breath is fine? As general tips. So this is something that you should definitely discuss with your advisor, but I would say if you're interested in a topic, again, similar to what I've said before, go read on that topic and see what other people have done on that topic to get a better idea of what you can do. How do you switch between American English and British English while submitting research articles? Different journals have different expectations. So I have written for journals that told me I had to write in British English. So I changed everything to British English, even though the original paper was in American English. So always look at journal guidelines. How do you write what others have written without plagiarizing? So I would say check out our article on the blog. We talk a little bit about that. But the goal is always to understand what others have written. If you understand what someone else has said, then it's easier for you to paraphrase. Must a research writing be attributed to a school or school project? Nope. I mean, you can write for fun. If you have a topic you want to explore, you should explore it and write about it. If I have to write an article or paper that has minimum number of words and I'm short of ideas, what is the easiest way out? Can I use longer expansive sentences to achieve the words tag? No, you can't do that. I mean, the goal of writing is always to communicate. So whatever you write, your question at the end of the day should be, am I communicating what I want to communicate? Will people understand what I have written? How can one critique an article? This requires understanding the article. You want to understand what the person has written and then start thinking about the other ways that they could have done this better. Or sometimes you read an article and it's just not well written. Maybe the method section is not presented chronologically, or maybe they don't use the right methods in the analysis. Those are different things that you can come up with to critique an article. What types of papers can come off a PhD? Like, I know you can do a literature review paper, provide a list of types of papers. So you can write anything off a PhD. You can do a commentary, you can do a literature review, you can do a research paper. These are all papers that you can write from a PhD. What is the cost of publishing a paper? So some journals don't charge you anything, but those are usually not open source journals. Open source journals will usually charge you a fee, and this can range all the way from $100 to several $1,000s. But again, most of them will give you either a waiver or a discount if you're coming from a lower or middle income country. You mentioned that you use sites for publishing articles, so I meant which sites do I post the abstract to know which is the, oh, so what I meant was, so if you go to a publisher like, there's a good one, Oxford Publishing. Sometimes they will have, if you go to their website, they will say, are you trying to make a decision on what journal is best for your articles? Because they have so many journals, they would have like a box where you can post your abstract, and then they will link you, they will suggest possible journals that you can submit to. All right. Yes, so the last question is about references, so that's correct. So 224 means references 224. So that's it. I think I answered all the questions.
Awesome, awesome, wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Elaine. It's been a very, very insightful session. Thank you very much, participants, for joining today's session. So it's going to be the same time tomorrow, 6 p.m. Still the same link. And if anything will change, you'll surely be informed. So thank you very much for joining today's session. A very big thank you. I mean, the floor is open, everyone. You can drop a thank you message to Dr. Elaine for today's session. Thank you very much, Dr. Elaine.
All right, thanks. See you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, sure. All right, thank you. All right.
I started Python around 2016 or 2017, and actually at first I was confused because I didn't know what to use Python for. Then I came about data science. Someone like a big brother in school introduced me to data science, and seriously I fell in love with data science. But ever since I started it, I've seen some great works about it. I've seen series of challenges about it. I mean, sometimes I can just sit down and try to solve a problem, and okay, I sleep off, and I'm still dreaming about coding. You can imagine.
One of the things I've noticed about artificial intelligence in Nigeria is that it has been somewhat limited to just some key players in the industry. And the local and the grassroots levels of Nigeria have been really relegated from the field of artificial intelligence in Nigeria. So until recently, I came across this Data Science Nigeria initiative, and I can really commend what they are doing, because when I was studying in the field of artificial intelligence, I thought I was all alone in it until I stumbled upon their website and everything, and I saw what they are doing and what they are trying to do. That is to bring that knowledge, that skill, the mentorship and everything, to give it to the local players in the industry.
I believe data science is going to take over the world, especially artificial intelligence, because it's like power handed over to the youth to implement, to do something for their country, especially in Africa.
We need to help us draw insights, as much insight as possible. We are looking for those that can make this web-based, because we want to put the problem at the face of every one of us. So if you do it in PowerPoint presentation, then we have a problem, because again, PowerPoint only ends up here. But if it's a web-based solution, people can click on it and drill down and realize that just beside Chevron, we have out-of-school children. Just beside Nikon Town Estate and the likes of them, we have out-of-school children.
I think first we need to understand what data science is all about, or perhaps artificial intelligence. its ability to interpret things that are complex, things that are natural puzzles that a normal mind cannot understand. And it means that you're bringing data from different sources to make meaningful decisions. You know, when it comes, and it becomes more complex when you come into financial industry, when you cannot make an error. Thinking and machine thinking to come together, and we create exponential capability to
First time in Nigeria. This is my first time in Nigeria, and with this gathering like Data Science Nigeria, so I was very amazed, very surprised how people here, you guys are doing very good work. So, you know, enable people to use this kind of technology. When I was in Morocco, I wasn't thinking about that. When I came here, so wow, people are really doing really good stuff. So I see in near future, a bright future for Africa in data science. And I think that we are on the good way to solve our local problem here if we use it in a meaningful way. And I think, I hope this will be the case in the near future.
This is my second boot camp actually. I was here last year. Okay, so after the boot camp last year, I was like, where do I go from here? Really? So there was that huge gap that I really don't know what to do. So I took part in the hackathon, KPMG, and I qualified, and I did well. Actually, and I was called on from KPMG to join their team. I'll tell anybody who is aspiring to become a data scientist that you have to start now, really.
I'm very happy to be here at the bootcamp this year. This is my very first time here, and I've learned a lot. I've met very good experts that are very knowledgeable in the field. And I'm very happy because Dr. Bayo has, you know, opened an avenue where young minds, young people can learn a lot. They can learn so many things, and not just learning, but they can also actually put it to practice.
As Microsoft, we see the future of the world is driving more towards intelligent systems. And key amongst this is the financial services, because banks rely heavily, a ton, on data. And so as Microsoft, we invest in this specific area.